Hello and welcome to Newsnight, where we speak to major league players in Nigeria's democracy and the issues generated from its drive for growth and development. I am Ladi Akeredoluwale. Thanks for joining us. The situation with national security and its challenges appears to be taking ever more complicated forms. There is the insurgency in the northeast, banditry, kidnapping, and cattle rustling, as well as farmers-herders clashes nationwide. Now, a line appears to have been crossed with jailbreaks and the burning of both private and public property, as well as the deliberate killing of security agents, amongst others. The question remains, what can and should authorities do to stem the tide? Newsnight talks to former Army commander and now national chairman of the Restructuring Actualization Movement, Major General Henry Ayoola. General Ayoola, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
We are seeing manifestations every day that our security situation is perhaps more serious than ever before and more serious than anybody could have thought. From the kidnapping to banditry to cattle rustling, and then of course insurgencies. Because some have described what has happened in the southeast as some form of insurgency, even though it hasn't been declared as such. I'm wondering if, in your mind, being a military commander who has been also a field commander, you think that way, or is this perhaps non-state actors taking this to the next level because they don't get the same kind of reaction they were expecting from the authorities?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you put it squarely. I think in the mind of any Nigerian today, I mean, anybody who's been around for at least some 50, 60 years, I think we have come to a head. You know, it's never been this challenging, I mean, security-wise. So I think it's the right way to put it.
Yeah. Let's take a look at it a bit more deeply. Let's start with, of course, the insurgency in the northeast, which some have described as the base from which all these other things grew. What's your general view about that battle, given the fact that it's been on now for 12 years plus, and we don't seem to have had a decisive victory?
Yeah, I think the peculiarities of the northeast is what is hitting us hard. When we realize that the warfare involved there is a hybrid warfare, and I mean hybrid, it's a little of every kind of warfare. There's a guerrilla warfare, there's the conventional, there is the population-centric kind of warfare, there is a close quarter battle, there is revolutionary warfare. It involves all of them. So often we call that kind of warfare hybrid warfare, where there's an element, a little element of each of the other ones. That's one. Secondly, we also realize that it's a warfare that is ideologically based. It changes the equation entirely. An average soldier is trained to fight a soldier who is a rational person, who does not want to die, who, if he hears a shot, he will dash down, take cover, throw to the nearest cover, do some quick appreciation, and then think of what next to do. So when you're fighting against an enemy on the other side that you are firing at and they keep coming at you, it changes the whole psychology of warfare. You know, that is also there. Again, it's obvious that we have not given any kind of decisive solution, a holistic kind of solution that we ought to give it, taking note of these peculiarities. I mean, so far it's like we've been treating with kiss glove. You know, there is no obvious, palpable, all of society approach to solving the problem.
Is it also possible that, apart from all the things you mentioned, that there's also the issue of the terrain that this war, quote and unquote, is being fought in, for example? I mean, we're told that a lot of that area is open grasslands, not much for cover and so on, and therefore it makes those who are fighting, particularly those who, as you pointed out, have rules of engagement of fighting, more difficult. It makes it more difficult for them to engage in this kind of warfare.
Yeah, well, no doubt terrain is a factor that must be, considered in any warfare. But of course, every armed forces anywhere, every army anywhere is trained to fight on different terrains. Okay, even the way it's structured is that the units that are around a particular terrain will have been training for that terrain. So when anything comes within that their area of responsibility, it means there has been some contingency plan. They have envisaged having to fight on that terrain before. Yeah, terrain certainly will have its own limitations or setback or some or influence in whatever form, either negative or positive. Yeah, it has its own contribution to the overall thing. But it cannot be a determinant thing because the terrain is common to both sides anyway. It's not as if the other side has a different terrain and you are fighting on a different terrain. So it's there, but it's not that remarkable as to tilt, the battle on the enemy side. Okay.
Why I ask that question is double-fold. The first is that, yes, it is true, both the military and the insurgents are fighting on the same terrain, but it appears as if the insurgents are more used to that terrain than the military. That's number one. Number two is that the equipment, superior as they appear to be, that the military is holding, may not really give them the advantage because of the terrain. I'm speaking now as a non-military person, looking in, out, and you, of course, being a military person. I use the example, for example, of a tank. I mean, if there's a road, a tank can really move fast and so on, but if the place is sandy, you may need a particular type of tank and so on. I mean, it is in this realm that my mind is working.
Yeah, sure, you're right in that thinking. There are usually equipment, armament that are adapted for different terrains, no doubt. They are there. And of course, you choose your arsenal for any war based on the terrain, and perhaps, of course, other factors. But what has happened here, you made a very strong point, the fact that the insurgents have been in that terrain for a while, and they remain the same, whereas we rotate our troops on the government side. So the continuity gives them some advantage of local knowledge of the terrain. Of course, if you inject new troops into the war in the northeast right now, there will be a time of adjustment. It will take them to get what we call inoculation, to get inoculated into the battlefield, to get acclimatized as to be able to fit in very quickly. So that period of adjustment, the insurgent can always take advantage of it. That's why sometimes we say it's not tactically wise to announce rotation of your troops, change of commander and all that, because those are information that are very useful for the enemy. So, yeah, that is there, but what we are seeing in this particular situation is more than all of this. Because if you go back, let's back up a little, and you realize that world over, after the end of the Cold War, nations world over began to reduce spending on the military. Defense spending, defense budgets were being drastically cut down. And that also affected us. But then what other nations did, which perhaps we didn't do, is that when you do that, you don't just do it as one holistic thing and leave it there. No. You now look at what are the kind of battles you are likely to fight in the future. Then you begin to re-equip and retrain your forces to suit those kind of challenges. That's where we didn't do that. And of course, for many years, there were no clear-cut programs of equipping the armed forces for future battles. And so it's like the chickens have come home to roost. That's what we are facing, and that's why the challenge is looking very acute, because the kind of weapons, the kind of equipment that we need adapted for this warfare, we need to start now acquiring them afresh. And of course, you can say you can buy some things overnight, but you can't even buy everything overnight. Some things are not bought off the shelf, some military hardware. And even if you do, training people to get used to it will take some time. It's not that you have a weapon in your hand doesn't mean you can use it immediately. So I think those are some of the challenges.
Field commanders like you have also raised the issue, and you talked about it in your opening comment earlier, about the fact that the battles are not whole society driven. It's like there are some people who are folding their hands and watching as the military takes on the insurgents. And they come into the picture only when they suffer as collateral damage on either side. That brings me to the role of intelligence. Some of the military commanders like yourself have said that it appears as if the citizens, the people in the areas where these operations and where these battles are ongoing, do not realize that the battle is being fought by the military on their behalf, and the battle on the side of the insurgents is being fought against them. Because at the end of the day, if they don't supply information that the military can use to find where these people are operating from, where they get their weapons, who is supplying, and all of that, it's an uphill task to defeat them. Is that true?
That's a very delicate question. It's a dicey thing. It's neither here or there when it comes to the locals volunteering information, intelligence gathering. Because they have to weigh on which side are they safer. Because again, don't forget, because the insurgents have been on the ground, they have occupied a number of places.
Yes.
You cannot have troops every inch of the ground. Okay? So anybody who is going to give information will think of what happens thereafter. There have been situations where the insurgents have gone to level a whole village because they got a wind that somebody there gave information out.
True.
And so they will consider that that's a major factor to their own survival. It's not that they are not willing. They understand this rationale that it's better for them to be on the government side. But then, I mean, if they are not sure of protection, then they will have to consider the repercussions and the reprisals that may come from the insurgent side. And you see, that's why we have to do a whole lot in generating more force so that our presence can be overwhelming. You know, if we don't do that, that kind of voluntary information we have to be considered as a delicate decision to take. You know.
Some people have talked about, for this purpose, just as you said now, including former commanders like yourself, and then civilians, even political office holders, have said we need to ramp up the numbers in the armed forces significantly. Apart from buying them weapons and all that, they need numbers on the ground. They need real boots on the ground. As a field commander, would you say that having more boots on the ground provides an advantage, given what you've told me already about the situation?
Yeah, generally. Even beyond the issue of intelligence. In fact, what we need to win that war, and win it in the shortest time, is overwhelming force. And when I say overwhelming force, it starts with the troops on ground. It starts with the numbers. It goes on with the numbers in equipment, in armament, you know, and of course superior intelligence, superior psychological operations, superior information warfare, you know, information operations, superior propaganda. We have to beat them all around. What we call multi-domain operations, a kind of integrated operations. Multi-domain, multi-mode, integrated operations. I had written a paper suggesting effects-based strategies and effects-based operation, which encompasses all of this. We need that. We need to mount. When I say superior force, it's overwhelming force we're talking about. Typically, the teaching is that if you are going to attack an enemy, it should be a minimum of ratio 3 to 1. Ratio 3, you having ratio 3 to 1 of that of the enemy. But if you actually now want to deploy overwhelming force, then you are talking of something greater than ratio 3 to 1. And that we cover all around, in equipment, in armament, in personnel, in information, in intelligence, all around. That's a tall task for the armed forces right now.
And I'm wondering if, of course, I mean, if we talk about the Army, which you were a part of, we're also talking about, for example, the Air Force, because in modern warfare, as we get to hear from time to time, the air battle makes the ground battle easier to win. From your own experience as former commander yourself, would you say that that air support or that air power is being deployed appropriately to support the ground troops? Because sometimes what you can see from the air, you can't see on the ground. I mean, going forward.
Well, the way to look at that is this. Looking at the recent developments
Yes.
from the new service chiefs, I think they are brought on board, a better jointness that was highly desired all along. This current chief of defense staff and his team, I was glad when I heard the chief of army staff giving his vision, and he ended up saying in a joint environment. So he was emphasizing that his vision or his mission is within a joint environment. Domiciling it within a joint environment, which means he understands that they are going to fight as a joint force. And I love that. And that is beginning to pay, some dividends that we can see. So if we do that more, obviously it will help the operation.
You were in charge of Operation Safe Haven, which is not quite guerrilla warfare, but it gave you experience of this kind of terrain and the kind of people that you're facing and all of that. What was your experience like as commander? What were the things you saw, the insights you didn't have before you took over the commandership that you now have, and how did those help you in tackling what was your task at the time?
Yeah, thank you very much. A lot of that, of course, will fall within the purview of operations and operational secrets. In fact, I wrote about 4 different papers when I came back from being commander of Operation Safe Haven. And luckily, I was posted as the Chief of Defense Research and Development. So that gave me an ample opportunity to look at different aspects of operation and write paper. And I wrote a paper on how to improve the operations in the Northeast. Okay, and I did an intelligence analysis that kind of profiles the Boko Haram insurgents. An 8S, again, which I can discuss in an open forum like this. But, these papers are available to those who need them. Again, we've talked about holistic approach.
Right.
There's also a need to look at those 8 components of the Boko Haram insurgents and take them concurrently. Because so far, without that, what we've been doing is like taking 2 of the 8 components and trying and fighting that. And that's why we've not made, certainly the effect of that will not be the same. And since we look at the other components, some of which may be outside pure kinetic operations, that may be psychological operations, some may even be political, solutions, right. Because it cuts across all the components. And so that's one thing I find very useful. And I think it will be very useful to the service chiefs if they decide to take a look at that and see how they can. And one major thing is integrated intelligence. We have so many intelligence agencies in Nigeria. And each of them are very, very professional in their fields. So why don't we form an integrated joint intelligence bureau or team, or whatever name we want to call it, that will face that whole operation and give it their best bet and work together. Everybody working in the area of its core competence and best area of deployment, and we get something solid to support the commanders in the field. That I find very useful. I work with some fantastic guys in my own operation then. The Director of State Intelligence, State Security that was there on the plateau, the police commissioner, the commander of the Air Force, all of that. Fantastic team I was lucky to have. And we work very well together. Cooperation is very important in warfare. Warfare is inherently a teamwork. No matter how good one commander is, if he doesn't get the requisite cooperation from other arms and services, he cannot do too much.
We've spent quite a bit of time on the Northeast, and that is because, many people consider it as the base from which this thing spread to other parts of the country. It moved into the North Central, into the Northwest, and then subsequently went down south, even though in different forms. So it's become a bigger problem. It's no longer localized to one area, and it's no longer one particular group of insurgents that you are facing. You are facing cattle rustlers, you are facing illegal miners. These are all people who have weapons Not too long ago, one of our former heads of state, General Abdulsalami, talked about 6 million arms pieces in the hands of non-state actors. Of course, since he made that statement, other people have said, General, you are being conservative. It's more than that. With that in the picture, how do we go about tackling that? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very important aspect. There used to be presidential committee on small arms and light weapons. And I remember the last time I followed it was when the second reading in the House for turning that committee to a national commission on small arms and light weapons. I don't know, the current situation of that body. But that body, this is a good job for them to do. This is a time to activate that body into serious work. Usually, they have a monitoring unit that will have kept tab on this movement of illicit small arms and light weapons. And so all they need is to be actually activated and empowered to do their job in checking the proliferation and arresting, encouraging people coming to willingly submit. Those who are actually holding them, maybe they don't have any evil or criminality to do with them. Maybe it just happened that they have them. Usually, anytime you call for people to come and submit arms, maybe for cash or something, you get something.
Yes,
it's a good place to start. Yes. It may not be all that you can get, because people never really totally ever submit what they have. Sometimes they bring the useless ones, to show some promise. Maybe if you do something a little better, they can bring some more, that kind of thing. So I think we should start from there. And I think, that's why I said, the approach to solving this problem has not been holistic. Because these are things that ought to have been happening since. Not waiting until General Absalam said it. These are statutory job of a committee or commission. So that's a good place to start.
Part of the reason why I raise this is that when people have these discussions, they say that the police is overwhelmed. Many of these non-state actors have better weapons, more sophisticated weapons than the police. And that increasingly the armed forces, particularly the army, is drawn into what are essentially localized operations. I remember there was a time we checked and they said the army was involved in various types of operations in at least 32 states of the Federation, one way or the other, either joint operations or singular operations in combating one group or the other. And that sometimes it is now looking like the army itself may be getting overwhelmed. Of course, the argument always is that nobody can overwhelm the Nigerian army. Do you, as a former army commander yourself, do you think that we should rest on that assurance that it's not possible to overwhelm the army? Or do we begin to make preparations in case that possibility becomes real?
Maybe overwhelmed is not the word I would want to use. I would say overstretched.
Okay.
Or overtaxed, taxed by, the army. Because, of course, you just said it. We are there in the Northeast. There are internal security operations in virtually all the states, like you rightly said. We are there in the Delta. There's a joint operation. There's also a singular army operation. There's operation in the Middle Belt. There's operation virtually everywhere. Okay, so it's obvious, and like I said earlier, that if you are going to deploy overwhelming force, it then means you got to think of emergency recruitment, emergency commission, some expedited training processes that will help to... remember the Civil War. We were just 5 battalions at the beginning of the Civil War. By the end of the Civil War, we were 4 divisions. So that tells you what took place within the Civil War in terms of boosting the numbers and boosting the force, the armed forces. So we don't have any shortcut to that right now. Because don't forget, one of the peculiarity of the nature of the security challenges we're having, either in the Northeast or even the one including the banditry, is because there are no lines. The enemy is not localized. They don't wear uniforms. There are no lines. Everywhere is battlefield as it is. So it makes it more difficult for the armed forces' presence to be felt or to be overwhelming, except you have huge numbers. If you remember the Jangebe kidnapping of the school children there was an FOB, Forward Operation Base, that was close by. But what was the size? They had barely less than a platoon there. Just putting it without, averagely. And of course, don't forget, you are fighting an enemy who sees you and you don't see him.
them, yes.
And so he knows where you are. You don't even know who the enemy is. So he could come around you, sneak around, get all the information he needs. And then he knows when he has studied your operation, he knows how many of you are there. So he knows what number to come with that will overwhelm you. Those are the disadvantages we are having. And those are inherent disadvantages. And that's why we must think about boosting the force to be able to apply that overwhelming force. There is no shortcut to that. Because that advantage will always be there on their side. That's why it's said to be asymmetric, because they are deploying, it's like undercutting a bigger force which they cannot handle, but taking advantage of the seemingly innocuous disadvantages. That's what they have been doing, and amplifying them to their own advantage.
It does seem as if, for a couple of months in the past, they went after soft targets because they didn't want to face the army or any of the other security agents directly. So they kidnap some people here and run away with them into the bush, demand for ransom to get them freed, free them, in some other cases, no. But now they feel emboldened, which was why I said what I said earlier on about the response that has come from the government or the military side of things, the security forces, let me put it that way. Otherwise, why would anyone think that they can attack the headquarters of a police force in a state, at the same time attack the correctional center in that same state, 200 yards from the government house of the state, in the state capital, and do it and get away?
Yeah. That is exactly the points I made. In the fact that they have studied the routines of those places. They know when they are on duty, when they are not on duty. They know when they are off duty, how many people are left overnight. So they have the statistics. And because, of course, they are not known, they are not uniformed, they can gather all of this information in a way that you won't even sense, you won't suspect anything. And again, because we have, like we said, we have not made it an all of society effort in fighting this thing. It's still looking like some isolated security challenge here and there in the Northeast or somewhere else. And so the awareness across board is not even there. It's not sufficient, even for the uniformed forces. So somebody who is in the unit somewhere in the East or in the Southwest or in South, who thinks is not connected with what is going on in the Northeast, doesn't have the same awareness as somebody who is right there on the ground in the Northeast. And so the necessity to up their alertness and vigilance is not as highlighted as it should be. So these are some of the... We have not even declared a state of emergency concerning these whole things since it started. So,
yes.
So you find that you don't have the same kind of alertness across board. And so it gives room for all of these lapses to happen. And again, don't forget, these same services that are also involved in one other operation or the other. So back home in their bases, they're usually light. If you have a battalion who is in the Northeast, for example, or perhaps that will be left back home, at best will be like a company. So if anybody gets bold and decides to go and do something there, he knows that he's going to have very little resistance. And that's why we need that boosting of number is just inevitable.
Let me bring you down to operational strategy now. And even though I recognize that there are strategies that cannot be disclosed in public for obvious reasons and all of that, but I also know that when we talk about operational strategy, there's a question of a buy-in. In many places now, regional militias, I don't know whether to call them non-state actors because they have the backing of their states. So you have Amotekun, you have Shege Kafasa in the north, you have now Ebubeagu in the southeast, and then you have the ones that are not quite supported by state governments, like the Eastern Security Network and other such vigilante groups, which smaller communities have set up. I mention all this because I want to know from you, are we making the problem bigger by allowing all these other actors to come and complicate the matter? Especially if they are armed, as some of them have turned out to be. So they are also competing with the army and other security forces in fighting.
Yeah, that's the inherent double-edged nature of arming any group or increasing number of people that have monopoly of force or use of force. Ordinarily, I mean, world over, government should be the only monopolist of the use of force. And that's why you call those other people non-state actors, because they are not supposed to. Okay, but a situation that is peculiar, we also require some unique solutions. That's where we have found ourselves. So, yes, it has the extra responsibility of what do you do to control this new outfits, to make sure they don't operate outside their statutory rules.
Right.
Because the way they've been structured is that the police actually has a structure of interfacing with vigilantes. Okay. It's a standard operating system that is already there. A lot of states have taken advantage of it before now. But now we are seeing that what the security networks that are coming out from the regionals now, we certainly need something a little higher than just ordinary vigilantes. But what is important is for the country to be able to figure out a complementary role they can play interfacing with the existing government agencies in a smooth, nice, seamless way without making them toothless bulldogs and at the same time without making them another force to counter the statutory forces. It's a delicate balance, but all it needs is some brainstorming. You gather a few eggheads here and there and sit down. There are strategies in the country, there are strategic thinkers, there are security experts in different fields, even some are lecturers, and they have great ideas. Bring these eggheads together and let them be doing the thinking, while those who are doing the fighting can then be free to, face the battle. That's the way to go.
That's the corollary of that question is the issue of decentralization.
Okay.
Because we are now delving into political solutions, which you alluded to earlier on in the interview. People have talked about decentralizing, allowing commands to filter down to states, maybe even local levels, maybe not of the army though, but because many of those have talked about police in particular. Police, yeah. But would you support this?
Oh, well, I thought you know that I'm national chairman of Restructure Actualization Movement. It's actually one of our advocacies. We advocate that. We've been advocating that for a while. Because the time has come. It's an idea whose time has come. To delay it any further is also to elongate our suffering and the state of security that we are in right now. In all sincerity, let's look at it. Most of the state governments are doing so much in equipping the national police as it is today. We see them every day. We see line-up of vehicles, line-up of equipment donated to the police in one state or the other. So they're already playing major roles. What is left really is a matter of control that a state governor should actually have what it takes to make him the chief security officer of his state in reality, not just on paper. In the fact that he has a police commissioner which he can give instruction to, can give directive to. That's all that is left, really. So I've had arguments here and there. Some say, oh, they'll be misused. Look, you don't throw away anything just because it can be misused. You don't kill an idea just because everything virtually can be abused. There is nothing in the world that cannot be abused. It's even an insult to say that governors who can be trusted with billions of nairas and this, but we cannot trust them with commanding or directing or overseeing their state police. We should even be thinking of going down, like you said, to local government, because security, just like politics, is inherently local. So why don't we take advantage of that local nature of it? And maybe let's even try it. Let it be on a trial basis. Let's see if it solves the problem or it helps to solve the problem. At least it contributes something towards solving the problem. If at the end of when the problem is solved, if we think that it's not the way we still want to go, we can revert to the old. God helping us if that will make sense at that time.
Many people have, of course, expressed skepticism. They say that these state governors, because you talk about people saying that the same state governors they entrusted with billions, and they say, well, some of these state governors were entrusted with those billions. They didn't quite live up to our expectation, even with the billions. Because in many of those states, they can't pay salaries, they can't pay pensions, They don't pay gratuities. So how do they hope to arm, clothe, and pay salaries for these forces who, different from the other people they've been owing since, these ones are holding weapons. And therefore, if you don't pay them, they can turn those weapons against you. I mean, how do you...
I like that question. And that's why in our own advocacy, we've always proposed that a devolution in the security sector to the state and the sub-national level, we also have to go hand in hand with devolution of resources and responsibility. You cannot have one in isolation of all the other things, because they need the resources to arm their, if the police, if they now have to be in control of police, to arm them appropriately with the peculiarity of the challenges they have within their own environment. Right. So that you don't have to have a police that they're all armed equally the same way all around. No, you look at your own, the nature of the peculiarity of the security challenge within your state, and know what kind of equipment, what kind of weapons, what kind of gadgets that they need, and appropriately, equip them. So it also brings, that flexibility to play. And of course, when it's regional, I've talked about this before, then it brings in synergy, it brings in economy of effort, it brings in concentration of forces. So all of these advantages will come to bear. And then, so because now, like the Amotekun and like the Argo that has come up now, it means you can overlap the responsibility, so your boundaries will be well secured, you can cooperate, you can collaborate, and you can have reinforcement from the adjacent states when there's a challenge in a given state. So all of the advantages are there. It's worth trying.
That brings up the other aspect of security, which is border control. Both internal border control and external border control. Some of those I've spoken to who sat in the chair you have, including former army commanders, have said that this latest challenge that we are witnessing now has its roots. Even General Abdul Salami's statement has its roots. The small arms proliferation everywhere has become a really big problem, because all the way to Libya, where perhaps Africa's biggest armory was overrun in the revolution that overthrew Colonel Gaddafi, and that those weapons have flowed down, and that all the countries they've passed through up to Nigeria are also experiencing difficulty, the likes of Mali, Burkina Faso, and so on.
Sahel region.
The Sahel region, right. Now, that's so we are not unique in that respect. But that the question is, how do they get in through the borders? So it brings up the question of border patrol. And I'm raising it with you because of the issue of devolution of the authorities down, in the case of the police. Yeah. Do you think that devolution should also be extended, for example, to international borders, policing, would it, in your view, strengthen our capacity at that level to prevent some of these things from happening in our country because the arms are not coming in?
Okay, thank you very much. There are already existing protocols and provisions in ECOWAS about some of this, even the issue of small arms and light weapons. Our establishment of a national commission is also premised on the protocol, that exists in ECOWAS, and even the UN, provisions for all of that. So it's in fulfillment of all those obligations that we are also part of. Now, let me say a little word about this banditry thing and the fact that it is related to internal crisis in our surrounding nations.
Right.
If you recall, in 1998, that was when we first started having the challenge of banditry, which was a result of the internal crisis in Chad and Niger. If you remember then when Hussein Harbe was overthrown by Idris Deby and all of that. And some of the gendarmes and national army who ran away with weapons and all that, they flowed into our border and all of that. And that was the genesis of banditry, really. And but today, banditry in Nigeria has expanded. That's just one component. There are about 4 different components right now in Nigeria right now. And that's why I don't agree with people proposing one single blanket solution for all of them. Because you have to take cognizance of the peculiarity of each of them. The banditry in Zamfara, for example, is totally different from the one that started in the northeast, based on what I just said about Chad and Niger. In fact, that was what the one of Chad and Niger then was what gave birth to the multinational joint task force, which came to be. In fact, it started as a small task force. It was called Task Force 20 then, that became the multinational joint task force with the headquarters in Baga. After it was this regime that came in 2015, now actually, upgraded it, boosted it, and then moved the headquarters to N'Djamena.
Right.
So that's one. But if you, I've done a lot of study and read several reports of different studies of the one that started in Zamfara is totally different from that. It started with, some crisis between the Hausas and the Fulanis. And most of these Fulanis are Bororos from Chad, the same Chad and Niger again. But, I don't want to go too much deeply into that, but it's a totally different component. Then there is the component of, those that come, behind cattle movement. The typical Fula militia that come all the way from Senegal and so on, who move with seasonal, changes and all of that. Then, of course, there is the ones that have been inserted in some of the forests, Middle Belt and South for some years now. So 4 different components. We have to look at them. Each component its own peculiarity to be able to actually address tailor-made solution to each one. I was opportune in 2015 to lead a team to Turkey to study their border control system. It was a great opportunity to see how they do it and all of that, and the different ministries, agencies, and and so on that are involved. And the nature of our borders in some of the places, like in Yobe in Borno, where most of the borders are actually pure deserts. It's like moving between Ikoyi and Victoria Island.
You won't know when you've crossed the border.
You don't know you're crossing anything. It's like, and some of our own people, Nigerians, have kith and kin across those borders. So they don't even know they're crossing anything. It's just normal. It's like going to greet your neighbor. That's how it is. But now with the challenges we are having, we should start giving it a serious thought. There are many ways other countries have tried to implement such things. There's what we call sand berms that can be built that are cheap. You just need a few tractors to create the sand berms, and then you have crossing points, which can then either be manned or electronically or physically. There are many options. And then we have an ICT backbone that can then do the coordination and control and command and control to be able to pass information from those border points to the different agencies that ought to take different actions where where the need arises. And we have a few other components that are already in place right now. It's just a system that links all of these things as a single network and a system of systems. For example, we have the National Emergency Communication Centers, which NCC have put in place.
Right.
Where if you dial 112 now, your phone will ring in one center, and they will ask you what's the problem, and they can connect and get to the first responders, and they're even thinking of the way of shortening that response
time. Yes.
So if we is putting all of these things together in one single network, it will enhance our border control a whole lot.
Governor Babagana Zulum, amongst others, he has been particularly passionate about this, but others have also said more or less the same thing, and they cite as precedent what had happened in the recent past, which is that perhaps if we brought in mercenaries, professional for hire soldiers, that in 2013, 2014, up to the change of government in 2015, that those mercenaries came to the Northeast, and that going by the reports, they were very, very effective in sweeping away a lot of this insurgency, but that the change of government disrupted the plan, and that since then they've not been brought back. That being as it may, do you think that we would benefit from that now, one? And two, are there any other forms of international collaboration that you think we could explore? Why do I say this? A lot has been said about the uncooperative, and I put that in abbreviated commas, attitude of some of our traditional allies, particularly in the West, to assist Nigeria, even though we will be buying, with weapons to fight this insurgency. They put all kinds of conditions and so on, and all this take time. What do you make of it? First of all, the issue of the mercenaries, and then international collaboration.
Yeah, okay. Let me take the other way around. The international
Okay.
collaboration is easier. Usually, I mean, any country has some existing defense cooperation, defense alliance, if there is one, or just collaboration or assistance. You know, all of those different concepts are there. And there are existing ones. There are those that are already happening. I know that in the course of this challenge, we had opened defense section in some of our embassies with some countries. It's part of, you know, expanding defense cooperation and assistance with such countries. We are a member of a lot of international bodies like the D8, even though it's for development. But I mean, it doesn't stop you from having some military collaboration, you know, and all of that. So the ball is in our court really to determine how much of that do we want to take, how much of that do we want to go for. And that brings to the mercenary use too. It's more of a political decision. It's Clemenceau, George Clemenceau, former president of France, who says that war is too serious a business to be left to the generals. So it's usually the political leaders who determine some of these things. Right. You know, I mean that's why Clausewitz also says that war is the continuation of policy by other means. So I guess those who are in charge are hearing some of these ideas, and maybe we give it another thought to see some of those things that we can take. Look, there's a point an issue gets to that there's really nothing to hide anymore, and it will be better for you to be helped than to keep suffering the same thing. And it's not a big deal. The whole of Europe was helped by America to fight the Second World War. It's nothing new.
All right then, General Ayoola, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, my brother.
That's Newsnight today. Thanks for watching. As always, we are happy to hear from you on what you've heard and much more. Our social media handles are right there on your screen. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Goodbye.